All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a discussion of the Dresden Files, books 1 through 7. We are going to be focusing mainly today on Deadbeat, the seventh book, but we're going to start out with a non-spoiler assessment of the series thus far. And then we're going to have a non-spoiler, just quick discussion of Deadbeat and where we think it ranks in the series and that sort of thing. And then we're going to get into the spoilers hard and heavy for Deadbeat and any book before Deadbeat as well. So, but we will give a spoiler warning when we get to that point. We want to have a non-spoiler discussion first for anyone who maybe is just stumbling on this video and is wondering, hey, should I read Dresden Files? So let me introduce my two guests here. Today, I have with me our resident expert on the Dresden Files, Ben from the channel Books with Benghis Khan. And Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great. It's one of my favorite series, so I am just loving any chance to chat and gush about it.
All right, I appreciate you being here. You are our guide, you are our mentor, our Yoda, or whatever in this discussion, because you completely caught up in the series now?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
multiple times caught up
Multiple
with
times.
all the novels, the short stories, novellas.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
not kidding around here. All right. All right, I love it. And this is one of your favorite series, so much so that when I had you earlier on my channel as a guest for Dear Dr. Fantasy, I made you Harry Dresden in the thumbnail.
Yes, which is very flattering for me. I loved that. So thank you, thank you.
I thought it looked pretty snazzy, actually.
Yeah, Harry's tall and dashing. He's got the wizard's accoutrement and the hat
Hat.
in the covers that he actually doesn't wear in the books.
Yeah,
But it does look sharp on the
it does look
covers.
sharp. It does look sharp. Yeah. And my other guest here is, like myself, someone who is a relative newbie for the series, although I guess we're both 7 books in now. Josh and I are at the same place in the Dresden Files, so it makes him an ideal guest, not only because of that, but because he's just a great guy. But Josh is here from Red Fury Books. Hello, Josh. How are you?
Hey, Philip, thanks for having me and jump starting me getting back into the series. I had planned on maybe taking a month or two off, or 3 or 6, and then you said, "Hey, I'm going to be talking with Ben and you should join us." So I'm glad you did because, well, we'll talk about this book, but I love this book and I'm really
Yes.
happy where the series is at this point. So I'm really excited to talk with you because I know we're at the same stage of the series. And I know Ben is a super fan and he's going to bring a lot of insight into the two newbies that we are with this series.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited. And you were, of course, on a Dear Dr. Fantasy episode as well, but I made you into Fitz. So
Yes, which is perfectly fine. My my favorite fantasy character, my favorite fantasy series, my favorite fantasy author. So yeah, that was a great thumbnail.
oh, I'm glad you liked it. Actually, it is one of my favorites too. Still kind of chuckling over it. But anyway, we're talking about Dresden Files. I have the books behind me here lined up. I was inspired by Ben, actually, who had this whole like beautiful layout there. So I was like, I'm going to put my books up too. So here they are for people to look at while we talk if they want. But let's start with you, Ben. Please give us your non-spoiler assessment of this series. You said already it's one of your favorite series of all time. Where would you rank it among all your favorite series? What is special about this series to you? Why do you love it? Just whatever you want to say. Gush away.
Oh yeah, I mean it's high up there in my top five. Those top five are probably always moving around, but on any given day, I might think, oh, this is my favorite ongoing series right now, and endings are important to me. So there's still many books to go, and I imagine he's going to really land with where it's all going.
Do we
Since the
actually
last,
know? Do we know how many
oh
books there are
yeah,
going to be?
yeah, he wants it to be a nice round 25 novels, with the last three being like a big doorstopper of a trilogy.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow.
And
And
so
where is the series at now? What's the latest?
the last two, Battleground and Peace Talks, are they up there somewhere? But they were kind of a book that got split up into two.
Oh,
So that was book 16 and 17.
okay. So we are waiting for book 18 to come out.
Yeah, I think he's working on that now, and probably hopefully won't be too much longer,
All
but
right.
we'll
All right.
get.
Sorry, I interrupted your gush there.
Yeah, no, we're getting into the home stretch. And man, this was one of the first adult fantasy series I tried out. after many years of leaving the fold of fantasy. And so it was just one of these special series that I was just having such a great time with. I found it so easy to get immersed. I was doing these long commutes to work back and forth from Jersey into New York City, where I was working, and just listening to the audios on these long bus rides and subway. Like, I was just able to completely just lose myself and become Harry Dresden. It's this first person tale to me was just so easy to get lost in and just sink into Harry's POV and live life through his eyes, see everything through his eyes. And I was hooked from the start. And I know it starts smaller scale, but I've never read many kind of thriller novels at all, and haven't watched much TV kind of in this more like mystery sci-fi. Like I was never a watcher of the X Files. So like this whole style of monster of the week kind of noir was pretty fresh to me. And so I was so hooked from the start. And then it was just a case of steadily growing investment as the cast starts to grow. We start to spend more time with some of the side characters. We learn more about Harry's backstory. And it's just all these books started to just lead to my investment growing and growing, the plot opening up a little bit, becoming more epic scale fantasy instead of the smaller scale episodic. And man, by the time we reach Deadbeat, it feels like Butcher is just leveling up really in this early part of the series. So it's one of my favorites from the first kind of 10 books of the series. But then after that, from small favor onward and upward, it just is this stretch of books that's one of my favorite in all of literature. And just so I recommend it to a close friend, and he started it and he didn't love it as much as I did in the beginning, but I was just like, oh, keep going, keep going. Just like those first few, like he wasn't totally into. And then we start to get some larger scale stuff happening in book 4, Summer Night, and book 5, Death Mass. Some interesting new antagonists coming into play, and then throughout the rest of the series, like Butcher really cycles through kind of where each book focuses on in certain like maybe groups of antagonists and just all these intertwining plots. And so a lot of people I think have an experience of they find it amusing or fun in the beginning, but it doesn't get them fully invested until around this kind of middle part of the series. And then no one is prepared, I think, for where it ends up going. But yeah, this is a fun middle.
Okay, cool. And that first person narration, because Harry is the protagonist, Harry Dresden, and the narrator. And I think this is one of the most effective uses of first person narration you can come across in terms of getting to know a character, flaws and all, because Harry is a flawed character. Some of that, though, is just the way he sees himself, I think. So a bit of maybe unreliable narrator at times, depending on how much he knows. But sometimes even he's surprised by the way other people see him. So I think it's an interesting thing that Butcher has been doing in terms of that first person narration, but effective in the sense that I feel, at least anyway, even with his flaws, even with the parts of him that I don't approve of, I'm rooting for Harry. I feel very much in his court. I want him to win. I'm desperate for him to survive, even though he's the narrator. So I kind of know he's going to now, right? But yeah, very effective use. That's a very strong voice, and some of it, I think, Butcher, particularly in the beginning, borrows from that traditional mystery noir kind of vibe. But Harry has a distinct voice as well, very modern, very American voice, but a voice that I every time I open a Dresden Files book, I'm like, yeah, I'm back with Harry. It feels good, right? So anyway, Josh, what is your assessment of the series up till now, of the first 7 books? Thoughts?
So it's interesting. My perspective going in was, it sounds like totally different than Ben's, because I have read a lot of crime fiction. And when I first heard about Dresden Files, I thought, well, this sounds perfect for me because it's fantasy and it's kind of a marriage between fantasy and crime fiction. And I'd read a lot of crime fiction. However, because I'd read a lot of crime fiction, I felt the beginning of the series was really bumpy. I mean, I think when I reviewed the second book, I said, this is a great crime thriller for people that don't read crime thrillers.
Aha.
Yeah.
Because I felt that it just knowing, crime noir and reading a lot of crime fiction basically when I had taken my break from reading fantasy, I'd read a lot of crime fiction. So I was seeing kind of a lot of the flaws in the early books of this series.
Hmm.
But I was assured by so many people, Ben being one of them, Jake Bishop being another one, and Derry, and just telling me, like, keep going. It'll get great, because I suspected that this series would be a series for me because it is such a marriage between two genres that I really love. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I'd heard the term urban fantasy before until I've experienced this. I think I've read some things in that vein, but not that something that's like such a crime noir wizard / detective type of tale. So I knew at some point that this series would get good for me, and it certainly has. I felt that the first book was fine. Second book, I didn't think was very good at all. The third book, there was some things in there where I was starting to think, okay, I'm really enjoying this. And then it's just amped up. And then, I mean, Deadbeat right now is on my short list for book of the year. I think it's that strong. I
Wow.
think it was just perfectly plotted and fast paced, but not so much that we didn't get great little character moments here and there. The other thing that I really love about this series, I've determined that me as a fantasy reader, my two favorite things are characterization and world building.
Ah.
And I really love the way that Butcher's doing the world building in this series. At first, it felt kind of disjunct and piecemeal. Like it was like, okay, the first book's an intro, and then the second book, oh, we're going to talk about werewolves. And the third book, we're going to talk about vampires. And then we're going to talk about fairies and all this. And it seemed like he was just jumping around. But when we get to Deadbeat, it seemed like, no, he was just layering all of this together to be able to start telling these stories where all of these factors are at play. And it at this point, looking back, having read Deadbeat, it looks very, very deliberate. Or at the time, I thought it was just kind of piecemeal the way he was doing the world building. And now I'm totally impressed with the level of world building in this series, because it did really come together quite well in Deadbeat, where we had so many facets of the earlier books kind of culminate in this really breakneck kind of story. So that's really impressed me. I do like Harry, flaws and all. He's very flawed. I mean, I have some problems with him as a character. But I do, like you said, Philip, I cheer for him and I want him to do well. And I will talk about, because Ben mentioned the audiobooks. I've done a little bit of both. We're 7 books in. I've done 4 of them with my eyes, and I've done 3 audiobooks. And I think James Marsters elevates the material in many ways. I think he makes the humor funnier, and I think he makes Harry a bit more, I don't know. There's times I think Harry's a bit of a chauvinist creep, and I think Marsters kind of just dulls that a little bit,
Yeah.
makes him a little bit more likable. So I have enjoyed that experience. I think I'm going to continue to do kind of a little bit of both, do some of them audio, do some of them, just reading traditionally, but I'm all in at the series at this point. I mean, I think Jake told me that, early on you get to like this false peak, and then when you get to about Deadbeat on, like just about every book is great, and I just can't wait because I think this book was great.
Wow. Fantastic. Yeah.
Funny
Ben,
you
say
mentioned
something about the audiobook.
oh no, just that. Yeah, Marsters does everything you said, Josh, but and adds extra emotional weight and gravitas to everything. He's one of the best ever, and I've listened to a lot at those emotional nuances and adding that emotional weight and heaviness, just like Jonathan Keeble does in the Warlord Chronicles, and that really elevates the material, and it takes things to a really heartfelt, serious place often, and then is so great with the humor aspects too. So yeah, the audios are a fan favorite for many fantasy audiobook listeners. But funny you say that about the planned, felt like it was deliberate and planned. So Butcher, I don't know how much either of you know about the kind of original conception of the series, but Butcher came up with the idea for all of this in college, in a college creative writing class, and his professor kind of asked him to plan out and outline his ideas, and he went and outlined like a 20-book series.
Wow.
And he came back to the press and was like, here, I got the ideas, I got the outline. And she was like, I just meant book one. I just meant plan out the first book. and and so yeah, he really started from the long view with this thing. And I think there have been little changes and here and there, deviations from the plan, but I think in general he's had this all kind of scoped out from the beginning. And so this is really building very deliberately, and there are little tiny details that you'll see in the early books, books 1 through 4, that play huge roles later on. And as someone who loves that kind of deliberate plotting and where small details matter, that's one of the highlights of the series for me.
Wow. Very cool. All right. Well, we've already started to talk a little bit about the book that we're going to be focusing on today, Deadbeat. But let's get into a non-spoiler just assessment. If we were going to do a review, less organized because we're just discussing it amongst ourselves, but what are some of the things you would want to highlight about Deadbeat specifically as a book? And by the way, for me, I think I'm fairly similar to Josh in how I've experienced the series so far. I wasn't immediately like, whoa, it was just fun. It was a fun read. I had a good time. I laughed. I do appreciate Butcher's sense of humor most of the time. It lands with me. And as I said, I developed an affection for Harry and some of the other characters, by the way, some really strong supporting characters in here. I don't think it's spoilery to say their names, but just in case someone would object, I won't. But we can talk about those characters when we do the full spoilers. But just to know, there are some really great recurring secondary characters who have some pretty strong personalities of their own that I love seeing them as well. But let's get into a non-spoiler. Where do you rank Deadbeat in the series? Maybe up to this point, but for Ben, for you as a whole, how would you rank Deadbeat compared to some of the later books? Whatever you want to say, non-spoiler. Ben?
Ooh, so I really love Deadbeat. This was my 3rd time reading it. The first time I read it mostly in print, actually, so I got a bit of a different experience since I wanted to try out something different with it this 3rd time around. And I have always just loved this book from beginning to end. I feel like it has such propulsive kind of plot movement. The mystery here is really mysterious and high stakes feeling, but it's one where it feels like there's a bunch of different moving parts at play. So it's hard to pin down, what is going on. It's hard to predict, what the solutions are to this, what's going to happen. There's multiple groups of kind of antagonists that you get introduced to, and so you're wondering about, what each role everyone's going to play. Are they working in tandem? Are they kind of enemies of each other? Where does Harry fit into all of this? And so there's multiple different mysteries at play. And there was this great kind of Halloween vibe and atmosphere that this theme of necromancy and spirits from the dead. And I felt like it was very kind of atmospherically coherent and just leads up there. It's not like there's that many action scenes in the book, but the pacing felt very quick. It's kind of a mix of these really creative, fun action scenes with slower kind of character moments and conversations that really build a lot of the characterization, and just a real variety of those too, because it's not just Harry interacting with just the same person throughout. And so you get all these variety of interactions with Harry and others, with a mix of these fun action scenes culminating in just an explosive climactic sequence that is definitely a fan favorite, I think, as just this big ending action sequence. And for a lot of big Dresden fans, Deadbeat is like a clear kind of favorite from the first 7 or the first 10, and it's similar for me too. I'd probably put it right up there with Death Mess. I love Death Mess. So they're probably running neck and neck for my favorites of the first 7. And then with a series, your investment, the longer you spend in it, your investment just builds and builds. So when later books are just taking the series to an interesting place, I feel like it's it's hard for earlier books to compete. So once with Proven Guilty and then Small Favor onward, so many of those books from 10 onward are just some of my favorites in the series. And so Deadbeat doesn't quite compete in the big leagues with them, but
Wow.
kind of a strong upper middle tier Dresden book for me.
Wow. Okay. And I did notice too that my friend AP Canavan from Critical Dragon has pointed out that all of the beginning books follow a very similar pattern. That there's this element. It's not Monster of the Week. It's actually Monsters of the Week, really. And you have plot A and plot B and plot C, and gradually it's revealed how these plots, seemingly at first unrelated, interweave and come together in the climax of the book. And you see something similar here, but I felt like there was a different level, like Josh was saying earlier too, that he's bringing more and more of the elements that previously didn't seem all that related, that seemed randomly picked out of, kind of like in Harry Potter, when you're reading Harry Potter, just suddenly, there's a griffin, or, there's a whatever that's brought into the story. And it felt like that for the first few books. Like, okay, now there are vampires, there are werewolves, but now everything is sort of coming into I can't quite tell what it is yet, but it feels like things are coalescing, that we're getting to some kind of a series. We're beginning to see the beginning of where the series itself might be flowing into a kind of crescendo. So I don't know. That's how I feel anyway with this book. The first time I felt that way really is with Deadbeat, actually. So, but anyway, Josh, your assessment, non-spoiler, of Deadbeat.
Yeah, this is my favorite of the 7 by far. I mean,
Okay.
this is the one that all of the other ones I would say 2 or 3 of the other ones I think are kind of, 5-star reads or whatever you do your base your system off of. But this one I felt was on another level. And I think a big part of it was there's still this marriage again with crime fiction. And the one thing that there's not a crime fiction author alive that isn't a successful plotter, because that's one of the tenets of crime fiction. Just like in fantasy, if you don't build a world, you're probably not going to be a good fantasy author. In crime fiction and thrillers, the plotting is so important. And I felt this one was just, it was perfectly plotted. I mean, picture perfect plotting. It's funny you mentioned what, like, AP talked about the different plot elements, and you can see that very clearly, I think, in some of the other books. Like, here's the A story, here's the B story, oh, and then they get together here.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot more nebulous here, and it was a lot more subtle here. And it's funny, the action I felt like was the whole last half of the book. And it felt like about halfway through the book, I was reading on my Kindle, so I had the little percentage thing, and I was at 55%, and I was thinking, wow, we're like building to the climax already. And it just kept going and kept going and kept going. But it wasn't, I've read a few crime thrillers that kind of momentum actually got exhausting after a while. But I think, as Ben said, the one thing that kept this one, I think, from falling into those traps is those character moments, those little small beats where we could take a breath, whether we won't name characters yet, but whether it's Harry learning about one of the new characters in the book, or having, just a couple moments with characters from a past book. Those kind of sequences for me, I think, just really helped the pacing of this just so superbly.
Yeah.
But it went down really fast because I was just glued to the page. I couldn't put this book down. So it's definitely my favorite of the 7 so far.
Yeah, that's really well said, Josh. I like that observation, the character moments, because to me, a really compelling read isn't just action, 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 bang, bang, pow, pow. There are quieter moments. There are character moments, moments of development. And what I really liked about this series, this book, Deadbeat, was we got a lot of inner Harry. And we usually get that because he's the narrator. So we're getting his thoughts all the time. But there were some really interesting twists on inner Harry in this particular book that I found very interesting. And we're going to have to talk about that when we do spoilers. But I really like how we get mixed in with that outward crazy, just and hysterical at times too, I mean, there's some really bizarre stuff that goes down here, and we're going to talk about it. But also the inner stuff. I think that's a really important part of this series, and where I feel like a lot of fans, whether they realize it or not, probably feel the power of the series is in identifying with Harry, getting to know his inner workings and what's going on in there. And that got really interesting in this book, I thought. So, yeah. Any other non-spoiler thoughts for the good of the order?
I would just say before we go to spoilers, anyone that's watching this that's in the early part of the series and you're skeptical and you think, well, it's I'm not going to have the same experience as everybody else. This series isn't good. It's not going to get good. That's how I felt. I felt that, and I was wrong. And I think most people that feel that, oh, I'm going to be the exception. I'm going to feel that it doesn't get very good. It gets good and then it gets real good. And I can't wait to see where it goes. So just push on forward. I mean, these books are smaller time commitment than most fantasy novels. So I think once you get to like book 5, I think you'll see that there's some really great things going on. And then you get to this one and he just blows the roof off in my opinion.
All right. Well, you heard Josh, everyone. All right, that is your official warning for spoilers. We are now going to be venturing into Dead Beat and talking about this in a spoiler fashion. So if you haven't read it yet, thank you so much for listening up till now. And we will see you at some other point. Hopefully, maybe you'll catch up and watch the rest of this video. So, all right. And also, by the way, for those of you who are leaving, there are, of course, links in the description to these 2 channels, these 2 awesome channels, to these 2 wonderful people. So, guys, you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So, Dead Beat. Who wants to start? What do you want to talk about? What do we want?
Animated T-Rex.
I mean, come on. That's the first thing.
My goodness.
Yeah.
As soon as I realized what he was going to do, I was in public and I was on a bus and I cheered out loud.
Yeah.
That has to be my favorite moment so far from the Dresden Files, is the animation of Sue the Tyrannosaurus Rex as a zombie Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
inspired.
He sets it up so well too, because we meet the skeleton of Sue early on in the book.
Yeah.
And we hear that it's, one of the only complete full T-Rex kind of fossils.
And it's the real bones, not some like plastic, fossils. Yeah.
And they talk about, like, throughout the novel, kind of some of the ins and outs of necromancy and what makes for a strong zombie or a less strong one, and the older it is, the stronger. Like, there were so many little details that set this up, including Butters being a polka enthusiast. I mean, how great is it that he has this extremely geeky niche kind of hobby that then becomes so important. Yeah. And he gets this important role to do. That's his polka one-man band superpower. It plays a role. Everything about that moment of them, getting on Sue and coming to the rescue with the T-Rex it's just one of the coolest moments in modern fantasy. I think
all these things coming together. I loved Butters as well, and his brand of heroism, and how he goes from basically feeling like he's a coward and useless to understanding that he has his strengths, he has his abilities, he has a kind of courage. It may not be the kind that most people think of when they think of the word courage, but it's there and it's deep and it's beautiful. And I loved his role in all this. But we have to talk before. I want to get your thoughts on Butters as well. But I did want to mention the title Dead Beat, how cool the title is.
Yes.
All right. The word beat has several different meanings here.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's like a cop has a beat, right? So you're patrolling and taking care of. And of course, the word dead, there's zombies and ghosts and all kinds of necromancy going on in here. So there's that. But of course, you control the dead through a beat, through a rhythm. So I thought that was very clever as well.
What a great title. Yeah.
A great title. I mean, the titles are all kind of cool, but this one especially, it's kind of has a triple meaning, really. So I just thought that was really cool. But anyway, anyone want to say anything else on the title before we talk again about Butters?
I like the the symmetrical nature of all of his titles. How that's always 4 letters, 4 letters, 5 letters, 5 letters.
Yeah.
But it's also not cookie cutter titles. Like sometimes I feel in crime fiction in particular, all of the sometimes you get a title that doesn't really fit, or they kind of threw it together. It seems like, he comes up with these really clever titles, but also ties into the book. It's not just a clever name of the book. I think it works pretty well.
I think he ran out of those titles when he got to changes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, forget it. Changes, and which announces, hey, this is different now, folks, right? I assume, right?
Right.
Cool. So back to Butters. Anything else I didn't
No,
maybe
I think he's a highlight from the book, and it's especially on reread when I wasn't so focused in on the plot details and the mystery side. I was really focusing more on all the character interactions and development. And this is a chance for one of the first times in the series for Harry to be really interacting a lot with the vanilla mortal who's like caught up in all of this. And now Harry takes on more of like this mentoring kind of supportive role. And I just thought it was so touching watching Harry kind of build him up and not just write him off like Thomas was, as like, oh, he's a coward, he's just gonna get in our way and endanger us. And Harry's like no, that's not necessarily the case. And like even if he's afraid, he's rightly afraid. He doesn't have the kind of powers that we have, and this is all new to him, the supernatural world. And watching Harry kind of build him up and support him and keep him safe and protect and really take the responsibility of protecting him very seriously was just one of the more touching things throughout the book. I just loved seeing that, Butter's presence, what that allowed kind of the growth for Harry or his maturity. And it was very touching. And just even moments, some of my favorite moments, like, he's really scared when their apartment's getting attacked by all the zombies. And one of my favorite lines is just, we're not going to die. What is it? I marked it down because, you know why? Because Thomas is too pretty to die, because I'm too stubborn to die, and most of all, because tomorrow is Oktoberfest, Butters, and Polka will
never dies.
Polka will never die.
and then Butters is shouting it, and then he gets, taken up by the zombies. I just the second time and third time around just was laughing uproariously during that page. But then like when they're in the car later and Butters seems a little shell-shocked, him almost dying, and Harry's like, are you okay? And Butters like, Polka will never die. And like Butters, man, he's up for this. And just a fantastic side character companion throughout. And just watching him also, like the role he played as the medical examiner, but he has these doctoring skills and those come into play, and he's a little afraid of doctoring like living people, but he's still throughout like helping people and addressing wounds, and just he really rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
And it was a really touching part of the book.
Yeah, great side characters can really bring out a lot in the protagonists, that's for sure. And I think you're right, Butters did that. Josh, any thoughts on Butters?
Yeah, I think the thing I liked about the character is he had an arc, and the arc was just really about his own self-discovery.
Yeah.
I think early on he was just so shocked by learning what he knew was true, that this world existed beyond just the Chicago that he knew, but just the self-discovery, not just of the world, but of himself. And like you said, the ways that he could contribute. And ultimately, he was a big hero at the end. I mean, he was huge in this. But it's interesting, Ben, I hadn't really considered till you started talking about just the mentor role with Harry. And I was thinking about it, and this was really the first opportunity for him to have this kind of experience in the series, because everybody else, even the mortals he deals with, like Murphy is highly capable, and a lot of the other mortals are either in and out of the series, or they're just not as big a part of a story as Butters was here. And I think it was kind of the first time that you had this character that didn't have any power besides his own just kind of intellect, and Harry just kind of helping him. And it did bring out a different part of Harry. And I did like the little conflict with Thomas, because for a second I was like kind of with Thomas. I was like, man, Butters is holding them back. But
Yeah.
then when Harry defends him and you start to see, well, maybe Butters can grow into kind of some sort of role here. And Ben, not spoil anything ahead. Please tell me Butters comes back at some point in the series.
Oh, we see him again. We see
Okay,
him
good.
again.
That's another thing I like. I mentioned earlier how I like how the world building is layering upon one another. I like how certain characters are in certain books and then you don't see them. You might allude to them. Like we didn't see Michael in this book, but his name was mentioned a couple times, and I know he'll be back. I hope, because he's probably my favorite secondary character. But
Susan is another one. Yeah.
but I love seeing how, just sometimes on some stories you get different characters kind of come in and out, and
Yeah.
that's another aspect of the series that I
Yeah.
definitely enjoy. I mean,
I
this one, as much
yeah.
as I love Murphy, you didn't need her in this book. So, it
Except
was
as
kind
the
of okay to sideline her. Yeah.
kind of poor Harry gets jealous because Murphy's off with Kincaid.
Yeah,
She
which
comes back with
like
it looks like somebody beat her up, like she had a broken wrist or something, and I don't know what happened. We didn't get the
yeah.
explanation. I assume that's coming at some point, but
It's just more like what goes on in Hawaii stays in Hawaii kind of thing.
okay. It's what
But
happens in Vegas
like
stays in Vegas. Yeah.
I'm with Josh. Like we didn't need Murphy here. Like having her take a vacation allowed kind of space for Harry to, have this real arc with Butters and to have more moments with Thomas. We just learned that, he has a brother,
Yeah.
and so seeing them kind of interact, one of my favorite moments in the whole series. And interesting, like when you read, like binge this whole series and later go back to reread, it's like you forget what moments are in which books. And so when they come up where it was like this very impactful moment, I'm like, oh, that's in the middle of Deadbeat. Okay. Like when Harry and Thomas takes him to the beach and
Yeah.
they have a brotherly run, a jog, and they're having a heart to heart. And then they have their race. And, Thomas is trying to illustrate like what his
That's the water
curse
out of his
Hunger.
hand.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the water out of his hand. He's trying to illustrate for Harry, like, this is what I'm feeling every second
Yeah.
of every day. It's like what a powerful kind of family moment there. And so, like he doesn't keep the whole cast of side characters in every book and gives space to have these impactful moments with certain ones. And so over the course of all the books, like where our investment in certain side characters is growing and Harry's relationship with them is deepening. And in here, though, it's very much around Butters and Thomas, and even our favorite doggy animal companion,
Mouse.
Mouse.
Mouse, yeah.
When Butters arrives at his apartment, it's like, oh, you have a pony. Like I just love that Harry has this gigantic shaggy dog, who I don't know if like how much you can or what your thoughts are on Mouse's story, but he's obviously not a typical
No, he's not normal.
kind of dog.
But let's finish talking about that moment between Thomas and Harry before we talk about Mouse, because I do think that I found that to be a very striking and important moment. Definitely the most important moment between that Thomas was part of in the series. He was really didn't play a very crucial role there at the end. He just sort of showed up late, but that moment I think is going to have major payoff, because I do feel that Thomas is, in a way, there's a parallel with Harry, because they both have this monstrous side of themselves that they are trying to control, right? That Thomas has the potential to do real harm by satisfying his hunger. And in trying to deny that, he's trying to be compassionate. He's trying to be humane. They have these two sides to them. Thomas's mother is Harry's mother, the same woman who was immortal, obviously a very talented witch or whatever. I don't know a ton about her yet, but they have this other side to them. Particularly Thomas is very clear. He has this he's in the White Court. I guess he's kicked out now, but he has that vampiric impulse to feed off of other people. And he is just keeping himself alive. And that moment was really powerful when he knocked the water out of Harry's hand, because he was trying to quench his thirst. He gave him a little swallow and said, nope, okay, yeah, you feel that? That's what I feel like right now, all the time. And I felt for him then, I felt, wow, okay, we all have our inner demons. We all are fighting these battles. But to have it illustrated that way, I thought was really effective. So I'm looking forward to more of this relationship between Thomas and Harry. I think it's going to be really important. Any thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, I agree because I felt the sixth book was a little bit of a dip in quality because I think for me it was like three, four, five, and then six kind of dipped, except for the story of Harry and Thomas, and I felt that that elevated so much of Harry as a character because I think in many ways it made him start to consider himself a little differently, knowing that he does have some family. And
Yeah.
I loved in that book, particular discussion of family, you know, if because Harry and Thomas, as they're, you know, learning this about each other, Harry basically had no family and Thomas had a highly dysfunctional family. And the
Yeah.
question is, you know, who had a worse existence? You know, is it better to have no family or is it better to have a family, even if they're highly dysfunctional, like Thomas had to go through? So I did enjoy that, and I do really look forward to see where this relationship goes. And I thought, I mean, especially as a runner, like I totally got it.
Yeah.
I totally got that. Oh, okay, that's what they feel like
Mhm.
when he wants to feed all the time. Um, but I think there's a lot of just a lot of potential around that relationship between those two characters that I really look forward to seeing.
Yeah, excellent. So Mouse, yeah, I mean, obviously, I love dogs, but Mouse is a very special dog. There is something more to this dog than meets the
Mhm.
eye. But I loved how he and Butters show up to save Harry, for example, when oh, what's his name? The snake guy is trying to kill Harry.
Cassius, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
Cassius. That was a great Mouse moment, and he's not even full grown yet. So this is going to be quite the terror, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he also is like Harry in the sense that here's this big, intimidating, lanky, scary creature, but he's a softie too, and
Yeah.
that's Harry too, isn't it? You know that
Yeah.
Harry doesn't
Yeah.
realize even sometimes how intimidating he is for other characters a lot of the time. That he's kind of a scary dude. He doesn't quite and that's one of the brilliant strokes I think of him being the narrator and sort of unreliable at times is that he's surprised sometimes when other people react to him and he doesn't see himself that way, and that's true of everyone, right? That
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
see things in us that we don't see ourselves. So I thought that was really cool, but I love
Yeah.
love that Harry has this dog. I'm a more of a dog person. So Harry's cat obviously is cool too, but
Yeah,
definitely
I'm
feel
with
that
you there.
Butcher's doing more with in one book, I think, with Mouse than he's done through the previous books with his cat. Honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mister,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Mister.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like you're saying about how other people perceive him, there are certain moments that are so tough to be in Harry's POV emotionally, like when the book owner Bach tells him, I don't want you coming around the shop anymore. It's just like a dagger. Like Harry's like, okay, that makes sense. I know I'm endangering the shop, but he he felt like this shop is one of the few places, he could come to that was part of his community. And like it was so sad to see him kind of just absorb that dagger. And he'd only trying to be nice to Bach, and um you know be a loyal customer. and
Yeah,
and then it's a that was an interesting little moment there to be in Harry's POV for. And also just when he's talking to the alphas, the werewolf friends that
Billy
he's
and
been
company.
mentoring, and they kind of are friends. And Billy is this gung ho, like he wants to be Harry's sidekick, but Georgia is the more rational one and trying to talk things through. And something's obviously not right with Harry, and so let's be careful. And if Harry tells you, like, don't get involved, like, let's actually listen to him, which was a great point. It wasn't just being self-serving, but um,
She's
yeah,
smart. I think she's very
Yeah.
smart. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she's the more pragmatic of the two for sure. Um,
yeah.
I loved the role of Bob in this book
Uh-huh.
because I
Oh,
I felt in previous
yes.
books like Bob has had two roles, comic relief and delivering exposition.
Yeah,
But I think this is the first time that narratively he was extremely important
Yes. Yes.
and felt, I don't know, he just felt a lot more tangible, especially at the end of this
Yeah.
book than previous books.
Oh man, what did you both make of the beginning sequence? It's so chilling when Harry starts to ask him about Kemmler, and you see Bob start to get worried, like, oh, don't dig into this. And you're like, Harry, like, listen to Bob, like, stop asking him to tell you
Yeah.
this. And Bob's like, I'm getting worried, like, let's not talk about this. And Harry's like, no, I need to learn about it, just tell me. And then something shifts with Bob that, like, we notice as the reader, but that Harry doesn't fully notice until it's too late, and like he's almost getting killed by like evil Bob.
Right.
Like that was such a chilling moment. And when you learn that Bob has this really like interesting backstory, man, what did you make of that whole interaction and that moment with Harry and Bob?
Yeah, it was cool because it was another of those things that he sets up early on that has payoff later. Because of course, Cal tries to use Bob as well, and Bob gives Harry a little wink there with his orange flame in his eye, and then he occupies Sue as well. And it's a great time. So I love that setup. I thought that was really brilliant. How Bob ultimately comes back to Harry, and we get the Harry version of Bob, which is this snarky kind of fun info dumpy kind of skull.
Yeah, yeah. Where
No,
he's
it's really-
supposed to go, one of the books, he's supposed to go gather information, and he goes to like a gentleman's club all day or something like that. I
right.
mean, he's just like this bizarre, hilarious spirit, you know, but now, yeah. And again, that's kind of another layer of the world building, just knowing, okay, well, this spirit's been around a while and he's seen quite a bit. And, yeah, I loved his role, but yeah, the ending is so bonkers, but amazing.
Yeah.
Just so many things together.
Yeah. What about Harry not trying to involve the council, the wardens, or to get help because he's being blackmailed by Mavra, which was a really also another chilling scene in the beginning at his grave. Like, what an interesting scene, and for Harry's psychology also. And he is seemingly like trying to deny his romantic feelings towards Murphy, and like Thomas is telling you, like, obviously, like, you made a mistake, you should have told her not to go, like, you're being so dumb, like, you know, you have a chance to have something with Murphy, just go after it. And Harry's like, no, what, we're friends, like, we're, everything needs to be professional with us. You know, which is a very relatable worry. Like, they often do work together, and they are good friends, if you just want to endanger that.
And Bob points it out too, and tells him he's in denial.
But what about Harry maybe
that
putting
terrible
the entire...
joke about the Nile River, you know?
Oh.
Are you seeing pyramids or something? And
yes.
Are your legs wet because you seem to be deep in denial?
Oh yeah. Classic.
Yeah.
And what do you think of him putting the whole world at risk, possibly by not getting extra help, so that, you know, he could protect Murphy's job? Like that I'm like, Harry, Murphy herself, and characters point this out to him, like, Murphy would not want him to be putting anyone or the world in danger to protect her reputation or her job. And I think he realizes that later. So it's interesting to see, like, oh, you know what? Like, I have to reach out for help. Like, I'll do my best to protect her job and reputation. But like, he eventually realizes that. But at the beginning, he's just like, it's a relatable thing that he's a little bit being, you know, self-serving and just worried about his friend, his romantic interest.
I think he often feels alone, in that he has to take the whole world on his own shoulders and not enlist the help. And I think sometimes he just finds an excuse to do that. And I think that was kind of the case here, where he used that. Yes, of course, he's protecting Murphy, but eventually he does realize, well, Murphy wouldn't want this to happen just because of her job. But I think sometimes he just kind of cons himself into thinking that he has to do everything by himself. And, you know, a little bit of a character flaw for him, not asking for help, but, you know, that's a common one. But when he finally asked for help, I think it added such another layer, especially when we got the wardens involved.
Yeah.
Yes.
And especially,
Morgan,
I forget his name, the warden that as early as book one just hated Harry.
Morgan,
Morgan,
yeah. I mean, that seeing still that conflict with those two characters is so gratifying. I just want to yell at them and like, would you just soul gaze each other so that you can understand each other's perspectives? But
well, the whole tension over Harry, that was a brilliant moment when Harry shoots it was the corpse stealer, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
Lucio's body. And he shoots, realizing, figuring out, oh, she switched bodies, the
Yeah.
switcheroo there.
And of course,
When
Morgan
Lucio
sees it.
stabbed her, and
Yeah.
Morgan, of course, sees him shoot what he thinks is Lucio,
Yeah.
and goes berserk,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
really was brilliant. And also, I love the Ramirez and his role in that. And he thought to do the soul gaze.
Mhm.
He's like a young Harry, this Ramirez kid. He's like a cocky young Harry.
I like him. Yeah.
Look forward to his role in the
Yeah.
future.
I mean, there's so many important series moments here. Like, we think that the council, from Harry's perspective, is this, and the wardens are this incredibly powerful institution. And then we learn,
They're all
like,
run ragged.
that the wardens just lost like a majority of their actual fighting force to the vampires, and they almost got to the senior council members. And that when that whole kind of recent war with the vampires got recounted, that was so chilling. And just like from Harry's point of view, like, oh my god, like this is getting so dangerous now for everyone. And him getting enlisted in the wardens, it's like, oh great, Harry, take up the cloak. And then to watch Harry be like, no, I don't want this, and a little frustrating, but it makes sense because this is the group, and Morgan, who was kind of unfairly persecuting him for years, and he's like, I don't want this, I don't want to be a part of you. And Lucia had to kind of convince him that, this is, we need everyone we can, this is the side of the good right now, you need to be a force for good. And man, what a powerful kind of mid-book scene. That was one of those breaths that we took where, the action is coming down, we just get this long conversation happening in Mac and Allie's bar.
Great scene. I also think that there's so many good elements of conflict within Harry, and of course he literally has his inner demon to deal with in this book, doesn't he?
His id, yes,
quite
his
literally
id.
a huge part of this narrative, and I think going forward.
Oh no, you don't mean his id. You mean Lash. You mean Lash. Okay.
I mean Lashiel.
Yeah.
And of course, that's an interesting scene later with his id and Lashiel and him having this dialogue, but having the Lashiel / Sheila element in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought was really fascinating. One of my favorite aspects of this book, actually. So I'm going to get your guys' thoughts on Lashiel. And Josh, why don't you go first?
I that was one of the things that I didn't see coming at all.
Yeah.
And then and then he recounts everything and he realizes it. But the whole time, I mean, that really took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And that, for me, that's just another level of kind of how he's just building upon all the past books. And to kind of tie in our last conversation with, or our last topic about the vampire court and the war and everything, how this all tied in. Yeah, this was the book about the necromancers and all of this, trying to find the book and the word and all of that. But it was really just another subset of this bigger conflict that's going on. And that's what I continue to marvel, is how all these like little things are just kind of weaving together. But yeah, I thought Sheila, I was like, okay, well, that's why he's not with Murphy. He's got Sheila. This is going to be the new girl. Well, oops.
Yeah,
I'm just going to quickly say Lashiel in so many ways represents temptation, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
The power, but also the sex appeal and all of that for Harry, and his loneliness. He is lonely. That is one of the things about him, I feel, that brings out my heartache for him, is that he is so deeply lonely, and with a sense of he's a kind of orphan out there in the world who's trying to do right, but is feeling abandoned in so many ways. Even he's got this thing going on with his mentor Ebenezer, feeling betrayed by him at the moment. That there's going to be something down the road with that, obviously. But anyway, Ben, your thoughts on Lashiel, because this was,
oh my god,
Sheila.
Yeah, my jaw was dropping to the floor the first time I read this, and we get the moment where Butters comes to him in the abandoned apartment building, and Harry uses his wizard sight and realizes that Sheila's not there. Like, jaw drop moment. I think it's one of the best plot twists I've ever read. I really haven't read many mystery or crime books, though, these types of like plot twists which recontextualize like everything you just did, I know are probably more common in that subgenre. And in some movies I've seen, like Shutter Island or Fight Club, like things like that, where there's this really cool plot twist where it's like, oh, everything you saw happening was maybe the way it was actually happening. And then rereading, like, Butcher did an amazing job of not cheating, but like it's so many things are so well done where he's talking to Sheila and other characters who are within earshot seem to like be thinking like what's going on, like Bach or the alphas, like they're wondering like who is he talking to? Is he talking to himself? Like Harry doesn't pick up that they're weirded out because he's talking to himself.
Right.
But on reread you do. And then
Mhm.
just like the way it all happens, it really was not an instance of like Butcher cheating, but he really did it well, where it makes sense that, you know, Lash in his head being able to control his sensory inputs essentially like was able to trick him in all these ways, and playing a
Now-
crucial role in the plot too of you know like him having read the book and then her being able to recall the book and the summoning poem to him, like it played an important role in this. And I loved the inner conflict it brought out of not just on the kind of, you know, romantic temptation side, but the power temptation of like she's offering all this extra power that could be legitimately useful and helpful for him against bad guys and evil plots, and he's worried that, you know, it'll help now, and then it's just like I'll become addicted to it and need to rely on it. And that inner conflict was so strong throughout.
Great theme in the
Yes.
series, really, isn't it? The
Yeah.
idea that I'm going to take this power because I'm going to do good with it. But then what happens to you when you take that power that is corrupting in and of itself? I think there are so many great stories, you know, Lord of the Rings, for example, where this is a theme, and it's done really well here. I think the idea that Harry, one of the reasons I love him as a character is that he is tempted, but he consistently so far has been able to reject that. He turns down Lashiel, as tempting as she is, as much as she seems so sincere. And maybe, I mean, she's a fallen angel, right? Is there
Yeah,
any?
but she does seem sincere. Like
Yeah.
we don't know if she's like putting on this big show of it's all deception or if she's totally sincere.
Right.
And that's like Butcher made Lash this demon fallen angel character in his head, like such a three-dimensional, nuanced, complex, mysterious character. Like
Yeah.
the way she describes like having been lonely herself for so long, and
Yeah.
that seems very genuine, and it's confusing to Harry, it's confusing to us the reader, like so that is such an interesting part of this and so well done. But and Harry's very worried that his free will is going to be co-opted, but this leads to one of my favorite scenes in the whole series and in this book, where he has his dream with his father.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the father comes back at the
The
end
one
too,
at his grave, you mean?
yeah.
Because he has two dreams of his father.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But the message his father leaves him with, that, you know, he does have free will, that his choices are his own, like no matter what the circumstances might seem like trust your heart, you're a good person.
That's
it
another
just
big
seems
theme
like,
is
yeah,
free will in here.
yeah.
Is another big theme in the
It's
series.
just the exact message Harry needed to hear, and
Yeah.
you know, is so emotional too for us the reader to be seeing that.
Yeah. Josh, any thoughts on Lashiel?
No, I think Ben put it best, how Harry is so conflicted because we don't know kind of her. She's kind of an unreliable character, and we don't know her motives. And I think as a reader, there were times where I was thinking, well, just take the power. You can beat the necromancers.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be good. And then just get, you know, it's you kind of want him to do it, but then he recognizes that he may crave it. But then she brings up the fact of the initial, you know, him picking up the coin. Well, you wanted this, you know. So I don't know. I'm interested to see where it plays out. But that was one of those, like Ben, you said, one of those plot twists that they do often in crime fiction. But this is up with some of the best I've read anywhere, because I did not see that coming at all. And then when you see it, you can think back and you can pick up on a couple clues, but even so, it's just really superbly done. I mean,
Beautifully
there's so
done.
much in this book. It's remarkable.
Well, another thing we haven't talked too much about yet are the villains, the necromancers. And I did feel that there was most of the villains in Dresden Files are just evil. They're just bad. They want power, that kind of thing. I liked that there was a little bit of nuance in these. Two of the three main necromancers were just evil. Okay.
Yeah.
But there was the one cowl who
And
I
Kamori.
felt there's a little more complexity there. He's arrogant, he's kind of a jerk, but he didn't seem quite as evil as the
Yeah.
other two,
Yeah.
as
So
Corsair
interesting.
and what was his name? Devane or
Gravane.
yes,
Mm.
yeah. And then of course his assistant, what's her name?
Kumori.
Yeah.
Kumori. She actually seemed like she might even be genuinely like when she had that whole heart to heart, that truce with Harry in the
Yeah.
stairwell, and she was explaining where she's coming from. We could beat death. Imagine if we could take away all that grief. And Harry has to think about it. He's lost people, right? And he has to think about it. What if we could beat mortality? And that's a really interesting moment in there too, I felt. So Kumori definitely has some nuance. Even Cowell, I would say, has some as
Yeah,
well.
because Cal could have just killed him, it seems. But
Right.
he seemed to know about Dresden. So like there's all this mystery of like, okay, what do they know about Harry? How do they know it? Who are they?
Yeah.
And like what like yeah, he has this immense power. So it seems like he could have just kind of,
He could
gotten
have done
Dresden.
away with Harry a
Yeah,
couple
if
times.
he wanted to, but he seems to be amused by Harry or to see potential in him. So he's this interesting, mysterious character that felt dangerous and multifaceted, which I really prefer in my antagonists. I like that if they're not just, a two-dimensional caricature where they have like one primary motivation and that it never really changes. So yeah, I thought Gravane and Corpse Taker and the Ghoul definitely some of the weaker aspects of the book, but
I mean,
they
they're
added
just
some color.
baddies. Yeah, they
Yeah,
do their job. Yeah.
they had a zombie versus corporeal ghost fight in the middle of the book. I mean, that was pretty cool.
That was kind of epic. Yeah.
I thought for a while, I thought Komori was going to end up being maybe like a secret person on the council or whatever, because she was kind of mysterious and seemed to have I don't know, seemed to have a good side to her at least. But
Right.
I don't know. I guess I don't know. That was purposely just him deceiving us.
I
Because I
wouldn't
think
rule
for a
that
while
out.
we
I
couldn't
wouldn't
see
rule
her
that out
face,
yet.
and
I think that's still
yeah,
a possibility, right? I mean, we don't know their real identities yet.
true.
So yeah,
Yeah, they keep themselves fully covered in those cloaks, which also led to one of my favorite jokes. Like one of the great advantages of being an urban fantasy book set in our modern times is you can pull on recent references for humor. Like I feel like secondary world fantasy authors, like they're limited in what they can do on the humor front because of that. Maybe you felt this, Philip, in writing. Like you can't reference Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, but
not directly.
like when they oh yeah, not directly, but like Harry's read Lord of the
He's read
Rings
The
movies.
Hobbit. It was the book he used for that spell.
Yeah, he's watched Star Wars movies. I think even though he has an effect on electronics, like I think he can go to the movie theater every now and then, and he's far away from the projector.
Yeah.
But I just love that he was talking to Cal and Kumori. He's like, seems to me that if you were on the up and up, you'd be working with the council rather than running around reinterpreting Fahrenheit 451 from a ring wraith perspective.
He's throwing them all in
Brilliant.
there. Yeah.
I love that line.
That's something else that Butcher does very well. I mean, I marvel at authors that not only can make me laugh, but that make it seem effortless. I mean, I think of Abercrombie as another one like this, because there are a lot of authors I've read that you can tell they're trying to be funny, but Butcher is he's just funny.
Yeah, I mean there's a short list for me of authors who genuinely make me laugh. And then you can, like you said, not to knock those other authors, because I think humor is just sort of something that's somehow innate or is early on part of a person. Like Abercrombie must be a really funny guy and to interact with. I mean, I've seen him in interviews. Butcher has that, I think. It's a rare gift, I think. And then you can tell the rest of us, when we try to be funny, it comes off as more effortful. But yeah, Butcher's got that for sure. Which is one of the great aspects of this series, really, is the humor for me. It is something that, because otherwise Harry's life would be just so dismal and bleak, but he's able to keep, part of his heroism is the fact that he's able to keep a sense of humor, really. So what
I'm
did we miss?
curious. I'm curious going forward to see, because there have been little beats in a lot of these books where people will be talking about Harry kind of around him, where it's almost like he's kind of this weird chosen one trope or something, or he's this powerful guy. I'm just wondering where all of this is going, because it seems like there's a lot of people in the know that know things about Harry that he doesn't know yet.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued to see not only what those are, but how Butcher reveals those as we go forward, because I think there's more going on. Like even in the last book with Ebenezer, finding out that Ebenezer was kind of watching Harry and that he was,
Assassin.
yeah, like he can just take him out if things weren't going well and things like that. So I'm very intrigued to see just the scope of this character, what we have yet to discover, because we're book 7 of what you say, Ben, 24.
25,
we're not even
yeah.
we're the 30% mark. I mean, long path ahead.
Yeah.
What did you both make of the first dream scene where he encounters, his father in the dream? Because dream sequences can go so many different ways, but man, I felt from the very beginning just that this felt like somewhat different than the normal dream, and it like that character of his father seemed to have this real weight to him. Like it didn't just feel like a manifestation of Harry's subconscious. Like it felt like, oh, he might be. And this is one of the great advantages of being, in a fantasy world. It's like, oh, his father, the spirit of his father might actually be visiting him in the dream, and it's not metaphorical, which is cool. But what did you make of that scene?
Yeah, if I've got this right, Harry's father is his kind of more normal side. Like he was not superpowered like Harry's mother.
Yeah, he was like an actual like physical stage magician.
Stage magician, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of Harry's humanity, his human side. I mean, he has his mother's pentacle that he runs around with. So a lot of reminders of his mother so far in the series, not so much of his father. So I really like that his father comes in the more human side of Harry. And that's kind of an anchor, a really important one, I feel. So I liked that Butcher brought in his father in this book a couple times, beginning and end. A lot of stuff he does in the beginning that has payoff at the end that I liked in this book. So I liked it. Josh, what did you think?
Yeah, I generally don't like dream sequences, but I thought here, because again, I think the purpose was Harry's character, and I think it did the job there. And it was very interesting because we did get, I forget if book 5 or book 6, where we get to see, they kind of run together. I read them almost back to back, where we did get to see Harry's mother in that. So I guess it was book 6, Harry's mother, and learn a lot about her. And we really don't know a whole lot about his father. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. As a rule, I'm not a big fan of kind of these dream sequences, but
was it a dream, or was he a ghost?
that's true too. Yeah. Because
I mean,
he did seem different. He didn't seem like just an aspect of Harry's psyche. He did seem like and feel like a different individual.
Yeah. And just it was so touching how Harry's like, once he sensed that it might be his actual dad, like how he kind of fell into this more childlike state, and he became more vulnerable and is like, I'm scared. And it was so touching just watching, Harry be vulnerable like that, and then his father kind of comforting him, and just building him up and telling him it's going to be okay. And man, what a touching scene. And there's so many interesting things going on there. Like there's these rustlings in the woods, and it's like, if this is really the spirit of Harry's dad, it's like, something is out there that is, Harry's dad's worried about, or he doesn't have much time to be talking to Harry. So many things about that sequence I loved, but just the emotional side of it was really touching.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else important that I'm sure we haven't talked about everything in this packed book, but
what about one of these little details that just, there's so many in here, but Harry seems a little psychologically traumatized from his burning experience.
Oh, his hand.
And then he is turned off from doing fire magic throughout the book, and then right at the end of the book, when he goes to light some candles in the apartment, he does his spell Flickimbicus, and no one made a big deal out of it, but for us, the reader, it was like, oh, what a nice little healing that he's gone through.
And
I
Butters is
love
gonna
that
have
detail.
him play the guitar,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
A
to
little physical therapy. Yeah.
he'll be working his fingers, changing all the frets and everything, to do the chords on the guitar. So yeah, I like Butters there as well. Just that his insight that he's gonna help Harry, right? And he knows there are ways that he can really help him, and this is one is to help him get his hand back. So that was really cool that you see a character like Harry who goes through a lot, and it's not like he just moves on and he's like, well, I won this one and there are no consequences. He's traumatized. He has physical and mental damage from previous books that you see layered on him. He's got scars and they matter. And I like that. And I like that we have a chance for him to heal. And it means a lot. You see him when he first learns that his hand could actually heal. He's brought to tears by that. And you realize, oh, he's kind of this silly, he got this macho mentality where he tries to repress a lot. And you realize how important it really was to him when he realizes, oh, I could have it back. And then he actually gets weepy. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in general the stakes with his character feel more real than a lot of these series. I've read just in crime fiction, a lot of authors, they have their Jack Reacher as an example, and then he's in 30 books. And a lot of times from book to book, there's no kind of connection, and a character may go through the ringer in a book and then they're just back to 100% next story.
Right.
And that's fine for the people that like those kind of like self-contained, airport thriller of the week type of books. But for a series like this that's layering everything, I think that's just another layer, is seeing just kind of the toll of what's going on with Harry. I mean, he was depressed for how many books? After Grave Peril, I mean, he was depressed for like 2.5 books, and I was
Yeah.
and I was glad that we saw that.
Yeah.
And I think it adds more realism, but it just adds a lot more, just the stakes. I mean, just in general, that that it's not just going to be, oh, we're going to go, book 8, everything's going to be just fine. The scars of what happened in the previous books are going to continue to affect his life going forward. And I definitely like that. It makes it feel a lot more like a cohesive series rather than just an installment of, Monster of the Week.
Cool. All right.
Was there just with the Errol King, is that like a part of mythology that anyone was familiar with? Like the Wild Hunt, the Errol King, like
Well, the Hunt, yes,
yeah.
for sure. That is stuff I've heard about many a
Ah.
time.
I heard of the Earl King because Franz Schubert has a beautiful lieder called the Earl King, and we studied it in music school, so I kind of knew his story. Go listen to it; it's amazing. But
That's
yeah,
cool.
so
Knowing
I
some
know a little
nature.
bit about it, and I'd heard of the Hunt because I remember reading. I read something at some point, so that felt familiar to me in the early stages of the book too.
I love when Harry summoned him and he started to get invigorated by the idea of being a predator on the hunt, and then though it switched and he became like the mindset of the prey. Like that was just such an interesting little sequence there where he summoned the Earl King and this dangerous creature, and but Earl King's kind of like respectful. He's like, wow, you dared to summon me. Like that's pretty
Also at the
badass.
end where he
Yeah.
forgives him because he summoned this great predator from the past, which was of
Yeah.
course Stu.
He was
He's
impressed,
like,
right?
I should kill you, but I really like that you summoned this Tyrannosaurus hunter, so I'm gonna let you off this time. Yeah.
Yeah, but like we get left on that where it's like, oh, if we encounter the Earl King again, like there's gonna be some danger. Like, and then he meets Mab, like he tried to call his fairy godmother, and
Yeah.
instead the Queen of Winter comes in her place.
Oops.
And Harry's like, what do you do with my godmother?
Yeah, and then
And
yeah.
Leanne and she, and Mab's like, she needs to be put in her place, and like Mab is a terrifying character, and she wants Harry to be her winter knight. And man, that is just this interesting kind of thread in the background of
A lot of moving parts.
yeah, so
Yeah.
many, and the whether it's the vampires, the Denarians, the fairies, like those are some of these core kind of groups of antagonists that get a focus maybe in certain books, but he weaved them all in somehow to this one, and just just what a deftly plotted book this was. All these little things set up in the beginning, the details that come back around at the end. things coming back from previous books. Yeah, just
Coming
a
together
fantastic
in
one.
literal chaos, having a resolution out of that. It's really cool. Yeah.
Beautiful chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both. This has been a really great discussion. I enjoyed this book, but the discussion elevates it even more for me. So I really appreciate you both. This was fun. And we're going to continue reading Dresden Files.
Yes.
So we'll get together. Maybe Josh, maybe you'd like to host our next discussion. I don't know. We'll figure out when we're going to meet for what is book 8, Ben? What's it called?
Proven Guilty.
Ooh, all
Man,
right.
that is one very thematically coherent and a bit of a darker one. Man, I love it. I love it.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're ready. Well, thank you both once again. Thank you everybody who's watched this. I will have, of course, the links to both of these great channels, Books with Bengus Khan and Red Fury Books, in the description. Go and check them out for some awesome content, some passionate readers, and just good people. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time.